So here we are in the sunshine at Twickenham. What a place for England to, I suppose, officially get their World Cup preparations underway. Steve Borthwick has named his 33-man squad to take to France this morning. That's what I'm talking about in this video. It's always the way with selection that people have a lot of opinions about it. So make sure you drop yours down in the comments. Frankly, I think the reaction to this squad is going to be pretty negative, and whilst I understand that, I also kind of think, what did we expect really from the way in which Steve Borthwick is going to try and set up this England team? So drop a comment down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I'll put the squad up on screen in just a second. As I said in the intro, I feel like the reaction overall is going to be pretty negative to the squad. I think there is a bit of a malaise over the team at the moment, the way in which they're playing. That wasn't helped at all by what we saw in Cardiff on the weekend either. But I'm not going to go down that route too much, because I kind of don't really know what we expect at this point. Yes, I would have Alex Mitchell as my starting 9 for England, but he hasn't been part of the squad for quite a while, so there's no point going into that too much more. We could also chat about Zach Mercer and different options at number 8 and various different positions. I'm going to resist doing that and speak more about the players that have been named. As I say, I think this is a squad that kind of makes sense in terms of how Steve Borthwick wants to set this team up. Yes, it's probably not going to be the most exciting rugby. Many people will say that we shouldn't even be going down this path in the first place, but it's the trajectory that we are on. So here's the squad for you. There are a few surprise things. I think the biggest headline really is no Henry Slade. Joe Marchant getting the place amongst the centres with Manu Tuilagi and Ollie Lawrence. Obviously you've got Elliot Daly, possibly could play outside centre. Owen Farrell possibly could play inside centre. So a few different options there. On Henry Slade, this for me is one of those selections that at first seems like a real shock, because he has been pretty much an ever-present in England squads since 2015, whether that be coming off the bench, whether it be playing at inside centre, outside centre. In fact, I think he's even had some periods at fullback as well for England. He's always been there, so it's a shock in that regard. But then I kind of think about it, and actually Henry Slade is a 50 cap plus international. How many of those matches for England has he really stood out and probably shown the sort of performances that his talent would expect? I think it's a handful. I think there was that occasion at the start of the Six Nations 4 or 5 years ago when England went to Dublin and absolutely battered Ireland, where he was brilliant. There was the second half against the Springboks a couple of years ago where for the first time you saw him and Marcus Smith and thought maybe this is where England's attack could go. But generally speaking, I don't think Henry Slade, for the amount of caps he has actually ever really taken that position by the scruff of the neck. So I think it's a surprise because he's always been there, but actually in terms of his performances, maybe less of a surprise once we actually think about it. That would be my take on it anyway. You guys can let me know your thoughts on that. It is a funny selection. Joe Marchant obviously heading off to France after the World Cup because he thought that his days with England were numbered or wasn't going to really happen. Now he's off to a World Cup. So, you know, it's funny how these things can change. The other two big areas I think that are worth mentioning in terms of this squad is hooker and number 8. Because at hooker, and we knew it would be this way, it is Jamie George, and then the drop-off certainly in terms of experience, and I would say the drop-off in quality as well, is pretty massive. Jamie George we know is the starter, and he's going to have to get through a lot of minutes in this World Cup. The options after him are Theo Dan and Jack Walker. Now Jack Walker has been injured, so hasn't really been training, and he has been part of Six Nations squads before, but frankly we've seen him come off the bench a bit, hasn't really got much game time. You've never particularly felt like he was part of the coach's game plans. I think he's probably, I wonder if he's even played a half of rugby in terms of the minutes overall. I think he's got 4 caps or something. So that's an interesting one. And then Theo Dan, who I think in terms of his all-round game is absolutely brilliant. Anyone who's watched the English Premiership would agree with that. The concern for Theo Dan is at scrum time, and is his physique at the scrum and what that does to England's scrum. And people will say, oh, that's being negative, or you've got to select players for what they can do and what they can't do. I think when it comes to set piece, as we've seen with England, particularly looking back to 2019, if you don't have a rock solid set piece, you're going to struggle to beat the best teams in the world. So quite where those hookers fit in and the amount of expectation on the shoulders of Jamie George to get through a lot of minutes, I think is going to be intriguing. If Jamie George gets injured, all of a sudden that's a real problem for England, which is also the case at number 8. Billy Vunipola is selected, he's the frontline guy. After Billy, what are they going to do there? Tom Willis I would have taken, but you feel like he maybe just ran out of time. I guess Lewis Ludlam probably covers it. You could have Ben Earl cover number 8 as well, but for me those are two positions that if England get injuries, then they're going to be in trouble, really. Elsewhere in the squad as well, I think one other thing that I really wanted to get into was the fact that there are a number of players that can play multiple different positions. If you look at Owen Farrell at 10-12, you look at Elliot Daly, who's the back 3 and outside centre at a bit of a push. You've got Max Malins who can drop in to fullback, Anthony Watson who can play across that back three as well. You look at the forwards as well. Courtney Lawes could play second row. I don't think he probably should because he hasn't played there in a long time, but you've got Courtney Lawes who is an option in that regard. You've got other guys that can kind of shift around in there as well if you want bigger bodies playing at 6. And I think the reason for that is partly from what we saw actually from the Scotland-France game and Xander Fagerson getting red carded and how easy it is for those situations to happen. And then also the concussion stand-down period possibly being 12 days. I think squads need to have an element of versatility more so than ever. That's always slightly been the case, but I think because of the way the laws are, the way the game's being officiated and the concussion situation, that's the reason that you need players that can play multiple different positions. The worry, I suppose, is if you're then spreading your squad too thinly and you don't have enough quality and you're looking to kind of cover all bases and what's the phrase, being a jack of all trades, master of none, that sort of thing. That's a possibility, I think, in terms of that. So that's my general thoughts on the squad. I'm not trying to get sucked into the negativity. I think England will play a certain way in France and we might not be inspired by it, but my main concern at this moment in time is whether they actually start being able to perform better. I think we have to see the strongest iteration of England, the frontline starters, the players that Steve Borthwick expects to start that game against Argentina at the beginning of the World Cup in the next couple of weeks, because they were poor against Wales with a fringe team, a lot of players who haven't made the cut. We now need to see an England side that show us something that can start to build towards actually putting in performances at a World Cup. So remember, England don't have to do a huge amount to be able to advance at the World Cup, but that Argentina game in their first group game in Marseille on the 9th of September is absolutely massive. So we need to start seeing this side put in the building blocks to be able to perform there. I'm trying to think through other areas of the squad. I'm glad to see Ben Earl there. I thought he probably wasn't going to feature, particularly when he wasn't part of the squad at the weekend. As I've said before on the channel, I'm not enamoured with the options at 9 at all, but we knew that was going to be the case because there's only been 3 in the squad for quite a while now. And what England do in the centres as well. I said Marchant was there. Are they going to go full power? Are they going to go Tuolangi, Lawrence? I just wonder whether that's too one-dimensional. I love the idea of it. It's the sort of team you'd select if you were playing a computer game or something, and to put your most powerful players in your midfield. Maybe they'll go for that sort of option. They've got options in the back row. I know some people will be upset that the likes of Tom Pearson didn't get selected. As I say, I would probably take another specialist number 8, a Tom Willis or something like that, but it wasn't to be. So there are positions we can debate. I can understand the concerns about the style of rugby this England team are going to play, but as I said, my 2 main concerns are hooker and number 8, and the centre, the Henry Slade situation actually kind of makes sense, even though it is a big surprise. That's my immediate reaction. I'm going to be doing another video with Tim from Egg Chasers also on this channel, and another one on his channel as well, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. This is my immediate reaction to the England squad live here from Twickenham. Drop a comment down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.